Welcome everyone to the International Mentoring Community Mentoring Lounge. And it's all about mentoring, mentorship, and mentee. So welcome. And today our show is about this notion of reviewing and evaluating mentoring. And Doug and I have three top recommendations for you. There's probably a lot more, but we're just going to cover those three today. We're also going to have Doug answer one of his great Quora questions. And if you don't know what Quora is, Doug will share a little bit about that. And we are going to have to start off with is a conversation about deep practice as it links to mentoring. But before we do that, I'm Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I am the Director of Education and Certification for IMC, and joining me as my co-host today is...
And I'm Doug Lawrence, and I'm the Director of Practice and Outreach.
And what we're going to be doing is the live broadcast, probably go 30 to 40 minutes, somewhere in that neck of the woods. Might go a little longer, you never know. The other thing I would request of you, a call to action, so to speak, is to subscribe to the channel. We'd appreciate you joining us, and even if you ring the bell to get notification, then that would be wonderful. It helps us tremendously to grow out what it is we're attempting to do on YouTube. So, Doug, why don't we jump into it and have a little bit of a dialogue here, I think would be the good word to use around the concept of deepening practice or deep practice. And I know that Doug has a deep practice, and I'm going to tap into a little bit of that. I have my own, but I tend to not go as deep or do as much mentoring as what Doug does, because I am doing a lot of the work in the background for IMC. So when I use this term deep practice, what do you think we're trying to get at here, Doug? You're the practitioner.
Yeah. So for me, deep practice is where the mentor is engaging in mentoring arrangements, relationships that are not the norm. So for example, and I typically default to mental health as being one of those where it's a different skill set. So a different skill set to be able to work with somebody who is attempting to deal with their mental health challenges and stuff like that. The other part that is really important when we talk about deepening practice is that it's a continuous learning journey, and that you are constantly checking, researching, reading articles, trying new things in your mentoring practice. It's all about, let's see if this works. I just finished taking a course, and that was one of the things that I took away from the course was there was a need for me to continue to try new and different things, sometimes for the good, sometimes realizing that maybe I won't do that any further.
For sure. So this notion of continuous learning really weaves into this story. You're highlighting it because of the course here. Is there anything else about that continuous learning that you would like to highlight at the moment?
Well, it's the big thing for me with continuous learning is that your learning comes from a number of different places. It can come from some of your lived experiences, and we're always on a daily basis, we're experiencing new lived experiences on how to, and then we have to figure out how we're going to deal with that. The other part is, obviously you're going to get learning from reading books and reading publications and doing that and writing books on top of all of that.
Yeah, and Doug's written a couple. I've written a couple. We're going to be writing a lot more, shooting a lot more videos to be able to assist those who want to deepen their practice. But I'd like to just add two things. One is from a deepening of practice is understanding that there are other educating approaches available to you when you mentor, and to know which one you're going to use at what point in time or space is really important. Often people say, well, coaching and mentoring are the same thing. Well, we did a video on that. Put a link down below about drawing. There are connections, there's competition, there's collaboration among those, but also looking at things like facilitating and looking at how does instructing fit into this, and do you cross the line from mentoring into counseling? These are things that one have to really understand about mentoring. And the second point that I would raise around deepening practice, and this is coming from a place of, I'm doing a lot of my own research into the notion of mentoring and the out of doors. So as Doug has it with mental health, I'm doing it with the out of doors. And how might you use mentoring, especially as it links to safety? And the key point that I'm going to raise at this point here is often it's helpful to go into an experience with a childlike wonderment than from the lived experience of the age that you're at and say, I think I already know this. I don't need to go do that. Well, I'm sure, Doug, you just went through a course. If you went in like that, you probably wouldn't get what, 100 times the value out of the course because you went in more from this childlike wonderment, this deepening practice through that lens. That's what I'm attempting to get to at this point.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to mention about deepening practice, or we can jump into review and evaluate?
Let's do the review and evaluate.
Okay. Well, the idea here is that review and evaluate are ways in which to certainly deepen your practice. Okay. And to know what is the connection, what's the competition, what's the collaboration between those two words is very important. And then what are ways in which you can use them? We're going to call it the top 3 recommendations of the use of review and evaluate. And this is a way to take a look at it, and this might be one of those phrases that have multiple letters starting like the P's. Is there's this notion of deepening one's practice as a mentor mentoring based on mentorship with a mentee. So say that 3 times and see what happens. Okay. But it really is the deepening the practice as you as a mentor with your mentoring within the container of mentorship while involving the mentee. And that's why this review and evaluate, we wanted to take a look at them today. And the first one we're going to look at is review. And review, as Doug and I have talked about it, is to look now, to see now, to consider something that's there in front of you, to review it. And you might link other words like reframe, reimagine, rescript, right? It's to view, but to review what is taking place. It has a flavor of formative or continuous. It's something that is moving with you all the time, and you're using it to see things now. And I would use the phrase along the way. As you're mentoring, the mentoring way, along that, you're using review to be able to see what's unfolding for you. I would also suggest it has a bit of a qualitative versus quantitative. And when I give the definition of evaluate, you'll get a sense of how evaluate is more quantitative. So qualitative in the sense that it's sort of more conversational, it's more subjective, it brings out feelings and the thinking that goes with it. For me, it's a really rich way to inform my mentoring practice when I'm using review. The other part that I would give to you is with a little bit more formal aspect to it. Review is about examining something still formally with the possibility or intention of instituting some kind of a shift. So when you do the review, All right. There's an examination, there's a formalness to it, there's possibility, or there is the intention of instituting some kind of shift. And the words that I would use is the shift would be continue, stop, and start. Is one way to look at it. Those three words, and that review is taking into consideration the time and the place. And that's an important element we sometimes forget, is that when you do the review, be mindful. So I prefer maybe the word minding, be conscious of the time and place in which you're doing the review. So when we get into the recommendations, you'll pick up a little bit more of why that time and place are really important. Is there anything you want to add to the notion of review from a deep practice point of view, and then we'll go to evaluate, Doug?
So I have a question for you, and that is, when you talk about review, is it part of the continuous learning journey?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. This notion of formative, continuous, is that I'm betting that while you went through your last course, you were doing quite a bit of reviewing and sort of like reflecting on what's going on, reflecting in what's going on, pulling that together, making some notes, then moving on, pulling something, moving on. You're continually reviewing what you've gone through. Would that be true?
That would be true. Yes.
Yeah. So when you are a mentor with a mentee, it's always great to be able to go, okay, where are we? Just let's catch up a little bit. Walk me through what's happened for you. Do a little review and get the person there with you just to find out what's landed, what didn't land, and to be able to get some insights as to what's happening. Okay. So when we look at evaluate, and I think you'll see the connection, the competition, the collaboration through this one, and evaluate is to form an idea of the amount, the number, the value of something. So you can probably hear that quantitative aspect, where review is a little bit more qualitative. So with evaluate, it has a summation, something that's summative. It's at a certain marker. So let me give you an example. Mentor, mentee, you're 3 months in, you may do a evaluation. Along that, every month, you might do 3 reviews. Okay. So reviews can add up to this notion of evaluation, this summation, that a marker. So to put it in a little bit more formal terms, so evaluation is to assess something formally. Again, that formal aspect is there, with the intention of instituting edits. And edits, I mean, is add, alter, and delete. So when you go to do an evaluation, you're going, okay, what am I going to add here? What am I going to alter? What am I going to delete? Versus what am I going to continue, stop, and start when you review? Slightly different language, has a certain formal aspect to it. And again, with evaluation, take into consideration time and space. Because often it's because of time and place that you're doing the evaluation. When you're in time and space or place, when you're doing a review, it's if necessary. All right, that's what I mean. Formative versus summative for the evaluation. Anything you want to add to evaluate at this point?
No, that was good.
Okay. So that gets us into the notion of this connection, competition, and collaboration. We use those to talk about what ways do they help, what ways do they hinder each other, and when they work together, what happens. We just use the word connection, competition, and collaboration in IMC. And so let's just take a look at them. From a connection point of view, I would offer that review and evaluate are like two sides of a coin. And you can't have one side without the other. So they both need to be there, okay? And if you short shift one of them, okay, like if you're flipping a coin and try to always get heads, okay, it's not going to happen, all right, unless you get a two-headed coin. Well, that's not what we're doing here. We've got a coin that has evaluate and review on it. So if you short shift one of them and only try to go for one all the time, well, issues can arise, all right? Because if what you do is just keep doing a review and don't do a summation, you might miss something that is really important. And so when we get into the recommendations, I'll bring up a really good example of that. So that's the connection part. Now, the competition part, I'm going to use another metaphor here. The competition of review and evaluation is sort of like two ends of a stick, because when you pick up one end of the stick, you pick up the other, all right? And the concept here is, if you only pick up the one end, the other end's there, and you say, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to evaluate, and you just show evaluation all the time, the person's going to wonder, well, what's on the other end of the stick that we could do? So that's why you want to be able to work with both ends. And that's why I often say with a stick, just grab the middle, and what you're doing is you're dynamically balancing which one you're doing. So earlier I mentioned, well, you could do 3 reviews before you do an evaluation. You could do 5 reviews before you do an evaluation. You could do one. Again, it's what's necessary at that point in time in your mentoring practice and interacting with the mentee. Now, just a couple of other things about that. With review, it tends to come a little bit more attached to the future into the present, okay, for the future. Where evaluation tends to have a bit more of a historic from the past into the present with some suggestions, recommendations for the future. So again, let me just share that. Review has a bit of a future aspect to the present for the future. I'm reviewing in view of what's coming, and then helping you to figure out your present so that you can move into your future. Whereas the summative is going to pull in some of the ideas and insights from the past into the present with the intention through recommendations or suggestions how to move forward. So again, it has that time place aspect that I mentioned earlier that's sitting with it. And again, if you use one end of the stick only versus the other end, or you use neither of them sort of in their own balance, again, issues will arise, okay? Because it'll feel like, well, all you do is you just review me, but I didn't get sort of a summative, we didn't go through a summative process, and the mentee may be quietly sitting, well, I haven't had a chance to really pull it all together yet. Could we? Oh, and that's why you've got to help the mentee say, guess what? I think it's time to have a summative evaluation versus this notion of a formative review. So again, that's the competition aspect. Just very quickly around how do they collaborate? Well, they're both ways and means to improve focus and strengthen your practice of mentoring and interacting with the mentee. That's how they collaborate. They improve focus and strengthen. So they're both individually helpful, useful, and eventful. I think we all agree. But collaboratively, when you work with both of them and find that rhythm as you as a mentor with that mentee, then it's even more so that they're helpful, useful, and eventful. And I think that, Doug, you would agree, is that when you find that rhythm with that mentee, which could be different than the next mentee, you know how it sort of just makes it that little bit more, I'll use the word special, maybe extraordinary might be another word that we use there. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
Yeah.
I look at the connection I've just made, and we've only had one meeting with a young entrepreneur in the Caribbean that I'm working with now, and instant connection. It was just, it was unbelievable. And then I just got notified this morning of an entrepreneur that was looking for a business mentor that we had a conversation about working together, only to have him decide that because I didn't have industry specific experience, that it wasn't going to be a good fit. So yeah, it's just the connection is so important.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the other thing about this collaboration between the two of them, you certainly get clarity and confidence,
Yeah.
and you avoid wasting time, effort, and money when you work with both of them. And that's what I mean. If you only work with one of them, you might actually not get the clarity that you want. And you may actually waste a bit of time because you may be going over things versus doing a summation to the review or doing a review in support of the summation. So again, things to be thinking about, all right, how they come together. So Doug and I sat down and said, hey, listen, what would be 3 recommendations that we would make about reviewing and evaluating mentoring? And this is what we want to share with you right now. And the first one is about the outcome of mentoring, both for the mentor and the mentee. So if you're going through the process, there is an outcome. There was an intention stated. What are the outcomes that are going with it? And what we're talking is by the meaning of the experience. Okay. What's the experience been like? Have you hit the markers that you want to? People use words like goals. We use words like action outcomes. Have you got those action outcomes? And the other aspect of this is review has you think about this outcome in time, sort of reflect in it in the moment. Whereas this notion of evaluate has you reflect on time, to reflect on what's going on. It's about time. So if I can give you a way to look at this, if you were to draw a line on the floor and you were to say that's your lifeline, okay, so we'll just go to a life example, and you stood on the line, okay, and you moved in that line, okay, that's reflect in the line. But if you took a step back, all right, off of the line, and you looked at the line to sort of take in the whole, that's more reflect on the line. So when you're mentoring, is that can you get to a point where you're reflecting in the mentoring as you're doing it and reflect on the mentoring as you're doing it? And so when you're in there, you can do the review aspect. When you're looking at it from whole, you can do it from an on perspective. That would be the evaluate component. Just a way of taking a look at it, because there is this notion, and Doug speaks to it a lot, is that there's this sort of physical, mental aspect of safety, and to be able to review, evaluate it, and see that as a mentor-mentee. There's the notion of the soul and spirit safety aspects with the use of mentoring. And then there's this notion of whole vertical, when you take a look at the whole from a mentorship point of view. And we just did a piece on felt mentoring, which brings up this notion of physical, mental, soul, spirit, and whole verse. Put a link to that one as well. So you can go listen to that one and come back and look at it through the lens of review and evaluate. Okay. Anything there from an outcome point of view that you want to add, Doug?
No, I think we've covered it off.
Okay. Well, why don't we pop into the second one, which is the notion of the response. And what we're getting at here is the type of conversation that you're having, because words matter. And in a mentoring arrangement relationship, the words that you're using matter. And one of the things that Doug and I always emphasize is interact with the words of the mentee, because that'll touch their heart, rather than use your words as a mentor, because you'll likely just get to their head, but you may not get it to drop into their heart. And therefore, this notion of review and evaluate helps you to figure out, well, what type of conversation we're having, All right. What are the words? Is it working? Is it not working for us? All right. Can we improve what it is that we're doing? To improve the worth of what's taking place, to be, in a sense, helpful, to focus on the truth of the conversation, where it can be more eventful, and certainly strengthen the utility, the usefulness of the mentoring, and just looking at that response. And there's some tools here that are important. And they are feedback, feed forward, and feed fromward. Now, I know most of you go, yep, okay, I got feedback. What the heck is feed forward and feed fromward? Well, if you remember earlier, I said, this notion of review takes into consideration a bit of the future to the present to the future. And that's when we talk about feed fromward and feed forward. What we're talking about is feed fromward is, if I'm going to share some insights with someone, it's linked to the future, that notion of what am I working from, my intention, bringing it back into the present. So the review is involved with the feed fromward, so that what you can do is get the person where they are at that point moving forward, so they have their feed forward. When you're doing the evaluation, feedback comes in a lot more. So what you're going to do is you're going to tap into, okay, well, where am I right now? But I'm going to tap into what has taken place, get that feedback, and bring it into the present to help that person move forward, with a slight leaning into the intention or what's happening from the future. But that review does use feed fromward and feed forward, whereas the evaluation will lean more into the feedback. And because we're so used to using feedback, we sometimes say, okay, we use it to get the person more involved. Okay. However, if you use this review and feed fromward, feed forward, you can start to see how the mentee evolves and you evolve. So if you're constantly evaluating for involvement and what's happening, did it work, didn't it work, and not paying attention to the evolvement, then you're missing a deep element, a deep part of the practice of serving as a mentor. And that's why we wanted to bring up this notion of what's the response? How are you responding to the person? And sort of catching on to what's taking place, what's unfolding in front of you, all right, from the future, in the present, and as it comes from the past. Anything you want to add there?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. The next one is the recommendation about the relationship, because, hey, mentoring is all about the relationship and then figuring out a structure that's going to work with it. I think you'd find a lot of hiccups if you try to go structure to relationship when you're mentoring. Even though mentoring has a flavor of structure, process, because it has ing, think about it as mentoring structure, mentoring sort of connection, relationship, and you want to lean into the relationship aspect of it. So another way to take a look at it is, because we're looking at the relationship, this relationship of mentor-mentee does shift over time, which is different than how a coach would go at it. What we're hinting at here is, while a mentor maybe it's a one-time meeting, it could be. But a lot of mentors and mentees actually develop a long-term relationship and keep moving their connection, their conversations forward. And sometimes someone who started off in a paid capacity as mentor might actually say, well, hey, I think what I'll do is I'd like to keep this conversation going, and they may go into a non-paid, or they may still get paid. Again, different kinds of arrangements there for that relationship. But no, sorry, I'm attempting to get butt out of my language, folks. The other aspect, I'm going to go to the concept of journey and destination. We always hear about Well, mentoring is a journey. Yeah, got it. But mentoring also has destinations. And if you go back to the review and evaluate, if you are along the journey, then you are doing sort of connection checks along the way. And you can think of the journey as your review. It's formative. Therefore, when you hit certain destination markers, I call those places of respite, taking a breath, catching up to what's going on, right? Having a sort of a sidebar conversation with your mentee before you continue on with what you're doing. Then that notion of think your destination to evaluate is where you can do some summative work, right? And to do a little bit of a connection check there. So I just wanted to bring this notion of review to journey, evaluation to destination, and make some kind of connection there for you, and see if that works for you. Again, you can certainly put comments about our recommendations below. We love to learn, and there's other ways to see it, or even add another recommendation. But any thoughts to that one around journey and destination, review and evaluation?
The one thing for me that always jumps to the forefront is the whole mental health aspect, and taking that pause when you sense that the conversation is maybe not going the way it's going. So you take the pause to sort of reflect on, okay, where was I guiding us to and why, and how do I back out of that conversation and create that margin or that safe environment for us to go back into that conversation, that relationship, and then start to explore a little bit deeper what some of the challenges might be.
So at that point in time, that could be a review, or that could be an evaluate.
Yes.
At that point in that place, you would have to decide which one it might be, because
Yeah.
doing a review will get you somewhere, doing an evaluate will get you somewhere. But guess what? You could do a review followed by an evaluate right there, and have a conversation that brings the two of them out. So yeah, it's the same for myself around this notion of safety and mentoring and the out of doors. Is when do you do a review around the safety aspect of it? When do you do an evaluation of the safety aspect of it? Because I think this is so true, and this comes from an acquaintance of mine, Ken Wiley. He does a lot of educating those who are involved in outdoor risky activities like snowmobiling up into the mountains, cross-country skiing across avalanche tracks, and he's into more higher adventure kind of ideas. And he said to me the other day, and I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, okay? He said that safety is a net benefit of personal development. So the more personal development you can do, there's a net benefit of safety. So if you think about safety from that physical, mental, soul, spirit, whole versicle, and mentoring is a way in which to help the person to develop, then a net benefit of that is safety. Your safer systems of how you interact with others, the safer practices of being alert to what's taking place, and the words that you use. So there's a lot of interesting parallels between the safety in nature, the mental health, right, and taking care of yourself, the notion of mentoring and being and serving as a mentor. There's some thread that's going through that. And mine, you can take it into the mentoring for the workplace, is through organization development, what you can do is see a net benefit of safety for the organization as a whole. So mentorship as a whole, there's a net benefit of safety. I just thought I'd bring that up because we were having that conversation, and I go, that actually connects to mentoring, that connects to mental health. It's a really, I thought, a really great way of incorporating the notion of safety. And I think in one of our next shows or so, Doug, I think maybe why don't we just take a look at this notion of safety, safe systems, and the safer practices as it links to mentoring.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of territory again. All right, just taking a look at two words: review and evaluate, linking them to mentoring, mentor-mentee, mentorship. I think we've given quite a bit to have people look at. Gave 3 recommendations. Anything in there that you want to emphasize at all before we go to the Quora question?
No, because I think the points that had significance, they all did, but the ones that had significance, I think we discussed in a little more detail. So I'm good.
Okay. And it sort of links again, if you're down at this point, go back and listen, all right, to Doug and mine conversation about the deep practice and deepening practice, because it was sort of like a precursor into review, evaluate, and into these 3 recommendations. So I think where that takes us, again, Doug, is into the world of the Quora question and answer. I don't have one of those deep announcer voices, the Quora question and answer. No, it doesn't work. Let's go for the Quora question and answer, Doug.
Okay. So just a bit of a background for our listeners is that I am fairly involved with the Quora website. And what the Quora website does is they have a number of different areas that they have people that go into the website. You can submit questions, and then they have people that will, such as myself, that respond to some of those questions. And I know for me, I've been doing this now for a while. And as a result of that, I'm when it comes to mentoring and business mentoring, I'm consistently in the top 10 of people, viewers, I guess, that provide input into the site. So it's a great site to go into. So I have a question that was posed to me, and it goes as follows: how do you provide effective mentorship? And my response was, good question. For me, it is all about building a trusting relationship with the person I'm spending time with in a mentoring relationship. Effective mentoring is about a two-way trusted relational arrangement where the mentor and the mentee will both learn and grow personally and professionally. It is a relationship based on trust and respect for what each brings to that relationship. It is about understanding what the needs are of the person you are mentoring and ensuring that you are bringing value to the relationship. It is about knowing the questions to ask to stimulate critical thinking. It is also about not telling or giving answers to problems, but guiding the mentee to the answers. In today's mentoring world, it is about being aware of mental health challenges and the course of action that you may have to take. I obviously could go on for a while longer, but there's so much more to mentoring than what most people understand. It truly is a gift, and effective mentoring is a life-changing experience.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So, good question.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. So the person actually used the phrase effective mentorship?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I don't always see those 2 words go together when people are asking questions. So that person must have been a little bit more into deeper thought when they put that question out. So that's great. So I guess in some ways they were doing some review. Maybe they might be in some aspect of evaluate situation for themselves. So
Yeah.
that's wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Appreciate that. And I just like to share with you from an and a more capacity before we head out into closing down. IMC will be launching a course that will be with the end outcome of being able to get your certificate of achievement. And what it will be is over a number of weeks. Doug and I are just fleshing out what that is, but we just wanted to do a pre-announcement about that. And it would be available for anyone who would like to get their certificate of achievement and work together through a cohort, a group learning format to see what we can do to help you get that. And then you can always upgrade or up level, and probably is a better word, up level into the certificate of competence if you want to. You can, if you want, say, I'm not sure that I want to go all the way. There is the certificate of recognition that you could pick up through the work that you do. But some people have been asking for something where they could actually work through together with some people. And we thought, well, we'll give it a chance, give it a go, see what happens, see how many people want to sign up for it. So we just want to make that pre-announcement that is coming. So like any other video, unless there's anything else important to add, I see Doug saying no through his head saying no, then as always, Doug gets the last word going out, and then I'll just say take care and we'll close her off.
So the only thing I'm going to just add a little bit to the cohort idea, and I just finished being a facilitative mentor with a cohort of young entrepreneurs, and that was the process we used, was one mentor, and it was supposed to be five young entrepreneurs in the group, and it worked great. It worked really well. Wonderful. So I encourage people to, when you've kind of mark the dates in your calendar kind of idea, but just be mindful of the IMC website and any future announcements, because this is an opportunity you do not want to miss.
So with that, everyone, take care.